There's this rocket being developed right now called Starship, and it's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It looks like what someone looking at a space shuttle in 1981 would probably guess a rocket from the future would look like. The future really is chrome. Oh my god, SpongeBob was right. More importantly, it's trying very hard to be the first rocket to get humans to Mars. It's also planning to get people back to the moon, lower the cost of getting mass into space by a ridiculous amount, and become something approximating an airliner that can regularly get people into space. Remains to be seen whether any of that happens, but NASA is pouring money into SpaceX faster than I can pour poor decisions into my life, so someone high up definitely thinks this has potential. In case you've been slumbering beneath the smouldering wreckage of a discarded Long March 5B, here's the summary. With getting from Earth to space, the big problem is weight. Rockets are basically just cylinders of fuel with a bit of skin around the sides to hold it all in, a rocket engine on the bottom, and a little payload on the top. The mass of the payload is normally in the low single-digit percentages of the mass of the vehicle as a whole, so the whole thing is pretty inefficient at actually getting things to the places that the things need to be. To even be able to get that kind of payload for action, you've usually got to split the vehicle into a bunch of smaller bits, stages, so you can drop empty tank sections to shed the mass once they've been used up. The end result of this whole thing is a system that can get mass into orbit, but that essentially destroys itself in the process when the entire vehicle either falls back to Earth in bits or ends up stranded on some unalterable trajectory in space somewhere. If you've ever wondered why space travel is so expensive, imagine how expensive airline travel would be if you were contractually obligated to ditch the plane into the floor every time you wanted to pull over for an ice cream. So to combat this, SpaceX came along and said, you know these Falcon 9 rockets we keep blasting into space? Could we slap some extra tankage on top of the first stage, bolt some landing legs on the bottom and reuse it? And that's exactly what they did. They also managed it with the Falcon Heavy, which is basically just a Falcon 9 with 2 more Falcon 9s strapped to it. So we're now at the point where like 100 perfect Falcon 9 recoveries have been done in a row, and the first stages are being reused like 10 times before being decommissioned, which has already made things crazy cheaper to get into orbit than it used to be. But then SpaceX looked at this amazing system they'd created, which would give it a borderline monopoly over the launch market for like the next 10 years, even if they didn't change anything, and they said, bored now, Mars time! So they looked at the Falcon 9 and asked, how much larger would this thing have to be to carry 100 tons to orbit and for us to land and reuse the entire thing, not just the first stage? And the answer was much larger. So they designed this goddamn thing. Well, I'll say that. The original design had a rounder tip, but Elon Musk told them to shave it down to a point so it looks less like a wiener. Technically that made it aerodynamically worse, but that is the price you pay for getting to not be treated the way we all treat Beef Jesus' fun-sized suborbital celebrity cannon. Starship is easily the tallest and heaviest rocket ever built, even though it hasn't really flown yet. When the booster section has all 33 of its engines turned on, it produces like twice as much thrust as the Saturn V. This thing is insane. That's just the bottom half as well, like the booster. The top half has engines too, some optimised for atmosphere so it can land, and some optimised for vacuum so it can jet around in space. Even just the top half is huge. Like, look at it. Come on. Think of the possibilities. It's like you're not even considering how much spaghetti you could fit in it. There is the minor issue that by the time this thing gets to orbit it's basically out of fuel, but the Starship's being designed with different variants in mind, including a tanker variant whose payload is just fuel, and Starships are meant to have the ability to transfer fuel between themselves in orbit. So the whole thing works like this. They launch a full Starship stack. The booster separates in the upper atmosphere, turns around, and lands back where it came from. The Starship burns its engines until it reaches orbit, and then the booster on the ground is refilled, and a tanker Starship is put on top of it. The tanker stack launches, does the same whole procedure, but then the tanker Starship docks with the Starship that's already in orbit and transfers over as much fuel as it can spare, then it deorbits, lands, refuels, and does it again. Rinse and repeat a few times, and you can fill up the Starship to the point where you can go anywhere in the solar system that you'd ever reasonably want to go. If I'm completely honest, the refueling procedure is a bit unwieldy. It feels like having a car that only lets you refuel if you spit gasoline into the fuel tank one mouthful at a time like you're feeding a baby bird. Still though, if it works. So how else is this thing unusual? Well, they made this thing out of steel because advanced alloys are cool and all, but steel is cheap and they're trying to pump these out by the hundreds, if not thousands, at some point. Also, most rockets run on a mixture of RP1 and liquid oxygen. RP1 is basically kerosene. I don't actually know what RP stands for. Really powerful? Very fast? Maybe it's the noise a rocket makes. Couldn't find a source to confirm that though. Anyway, Starship keeps the oxygen but uses methane instead of RP1, which means all the chemical elements needed to refuel it exist anywhere you'd want to go, meaning you could send a few of these to Mars, build a refueling plant there, refuel your ship, and actually come back, which is in contrast to some other Mars missions that have been proposed over the years, which have had more of a noble sacrificey kind of vibe to them. Thankfully, the upper stage doesn't need the booster to get off the moon or Mars or whatever. It only needs that on Earth, because getting through our atmosphere and out of our gravity well is like trying to ride on a tricycle through the bottom of a pool filled with custard. It's a good thing it doesn't need the booster for that, because they've neglected to bother giving the booster any landing legs to save weight, opting instead to have the launch tower be built with a pair of giant hydraulic arms to literally catch it out of the air. What could possibly go wrong? Listen, I'm not the guy with the notepad and the simulation software in front of me, but could they not have just used a big cushion? I swear it's like they've got a jug somewhere that they're trying to fill with the tears of a mechanical engineer to fulfill some sort of ancient prophecy. So anyway, I think that gives you a good overview of what the program is aiming for, a fully reusable interplanetary transport system. The program's gone through a few rebrandings. To begin with, it was literally called the Interplanetary Transport System, and I like that name. If they'd have kept that, I wouldn't have had to make this goddamn video. I know it's a little boring, but I like names that describe exactly what something is. Same reason I refer to my arse as my post-consumption regret blaster. Then they changed the design and renamed it the BFR. The B stood for big, the R stood for rocket, and the F sometimes stood for Falcon depending if there was a live mic nearby. Finally they changed the design again and called it Starship. Starship is a cool name, I guess. The inaccuracy of the name does annoy me though. It goes to planets, not stars. What if someone else makes a ship that travels to the actual stars? What are they going to call that? The Astral Canoe? In case you haven't noticed, terribly thought out naming conventions really boil my piss for some reason. Maybe I was an Xbox gaming console in a previous life. The sort of names I tend to like don't really mean anything specific, so they never become obsolete. Does leave you in the dark if you don't know what that thing is in the first place though. Like, I like the name of the rocket, the Delta IV Heavy, but to be fair that could be a type of toaster if you didn't know better. Actually, now that I'm focusing on it, Delta IV Heavy does kinda sound like someone posting on a message board saying, "I'm a branching river looking for an overweight romantic companion," so maybe that one's a bad example. Anyway, Starship did a few high altitude tests, which all blew up, except for the last one, after which they put a big tick in the didn't blow up column and said, "Nice, now we can move on to orbital launch tests next." That was in May of 2021, and I've been condescendingly staring at my wrist ever since. I remain ever hopeful this thing will fly sooner rather than later, but who knows, to be honest. I really want to watch it succeed, and it sounds like it might actually genuinely launch sometime pretty soon, but at this point part of me would settle for another explosion. I know it would set progress back, but imagine how big the explosion would be. That'd be awesome. This time it'd be a full stack, the entire thing, fully loaded with rocket propellant. Oh, I think I just realised what the RP stands for.